Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, American Education Week is coming up, but first, how could we have Pennsylvania Newsmakers and not do a recap of what? Of the election that took place last Tuesday. Let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, it was quite a midterm election. It seemed like it was the election that would never end, at least for those of us who were following it. And I think I'll have to ask our two journalists here, two top reporters in the state. They spent, I think, most of their life in the last 2 years covering the midterm election. I'm speaking, of course, of Marc Levy. He's with the Associated Press, and Angela Couloumbis with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Before we get into the serious side of this, and did this seem like the election that would never end for some reason, or was it just because we're so absorbed in it?
No, it really did, and there was so much anticipation leading up to it, not just, for people in the news business or in the politics, business of politics, but voters who were either motivated by a deep dislike of President Trump and those motivated by deep support for him. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. Now, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 57% turnout. If I got this right, 4 years ago in the state, it was about 41, 42%. What surprised me was not that the turnout was up, but the stunning nature of it. Now, I know you folks at the AP have been looking at that. What's going on there?
Yeah, so look, it was the highest midterm turnout since 1994. And the turnout in this election rivaled what you see in the presidential election. Yeah. It was almost there. It was turnout in the Philadelphia suburbs was particularly high in Bucks, Chester, Montgomery counties.
Over 60%.
Yeah, that was practically presidential turnout in those three counties.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, of all the features that we talked about, we were speculating on the turnout, what voters were thinking. It's absolutely stunning when you think about it. All right. So we chatted about this before we went on air. We're trying to figure out if there was any surprises, anything that we didn't recognize, anything from your point of view, or what struck you as unusually important?
I think the only real surprise, if we can call it that, was that Democrats picked up more seats in the state legislature, particularly in the state Senate, than I think even they had anticipated. Mm-hmm. But it was generally speaking, it was a good day for Democrats, although Republicans are saying and feel that it could have been a worse day for them. Yeah. Democrats held on to the governor's office. They held on to the U.S. Senate seat. Right. They picked up seats, obviously, as we discussed, in the state legislature and also in Congress.
Nationwide, it was more probably, Mark, a split decision because the Republicans picked up a couple seats in the Senate. As we prepare this show for airing, it's still in doubt about how many. We have to go through the recounts and challenges to the counts and the recounts, I guess. Mm-hmm. But overall, the fact that the Republicans have held on to the House and the Senate in Pennsylvania, now it's true, their numbers are reduced. We can talk about what that means specifically in terms of each of the various caucuses. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. But the bottom line here is, not arguably, we have a conservative legislature and a liberal governor. And are we going to have 4 more years where they just, is there anything you can think of where they might find a consensus on?
Well, look, it's possible something will emerge. They've worked on, for instance, opioid addiction together.
Right, good point.
But when it comes to the Marcellus, taxing the Marcellus show, when it comes to property taxes, when it comes to the big things where partisanship really gets involved, then no, it's these things keep going and going and going.
One of the things that you all have written about is the debate over education funding. As you also know, there's a new formula that's supposed to be more equitable to certain school districts. Right. But the problem with it, as some have identified, it only applies to the new money, not to, so we're talking maybe the new formula applies to 9, 10, 11, 12, something in that range. The governor mentioned that in his election night speech. Is there is that? You hear, is this important? I mean, how important? I mean, it's obviously very important to schools, but do you think that's something the legislature is likely to revisit?
I personally don't see it as being a real possibility. There was a lot of discussion of it during the campaign.
Yeah.
I think that there is a thinking that if you apply it to the entire portion that the state kicks out to school districts, then it's going to cost a lot of money, and so they're going to have to find some sort of consensus on where to get that. And adding to the list that Marc discussed earlier, I think finances and the state's finances are going to be a real point of contention between a more conservative legislature and Governor Wolf.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to get into some other aspects of the election, some of the big results, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, we're chatting about the election, the midterm election. We're now down to the results. Let me start with Marc Levy. We had with the Associated Press. I mean, I think what was stunning was not so stunning was the Democrats won 3 seats in the congressional delegation to go from 12-6 Republican, 12 Republicans, 6 Democrats to 9-9. But there was at least one startling big news item out of it, not just the pickup of 3, but it has to do with the Philadelphia suburbs. What happened down there with some female candidates making history?
So you saw 4 women candidates get elected to the U.S. House from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has not had a woman serving in its congressional delegation since 2014. It is the most populous state in the country that does not have a woman serving in Congress, and now it's going to have 4, and that is a record. That's a record for Pennsylvania of women at any one time. And
I think we've only had 2 was in the delegation at any one time historically.
That's right.
Go ahead.
That's right, and it showed that women were strong candidates. They emerged from primaries, big primaries. They won big in these districts that were essentially newly drawn by the state Supreme Court this year.
Right.
But yeah, it showed tremendous strength among women voters, women candidates.
Yeah, they're still counting them nationally. There were 84 female women in the Federal House of Representatives, and if I got this right, 91 out of the 435 congressional districts, which will now bring a record number of women, not just in the Pennsylvania legislature, but in Congress as well. So it sort of eclipses the 1992 year of the woman. I mean, and many of the women who were elected came into it partly because of gun violence, partly, go ahead.
Yeah, but I also think it's important to say, and Marc raised it, is these were new maps, and these congressional maps, and I believe sort of the untold story here is for years and years and years we've been talking about how the state is highly gerrymandered, and what would a Pennsylvania look like if it had fairer maps? Well, this is the outcome of that, and I think going forward, you mentioned the Philadelphia suburbs. The Philadelphia suburbs were key to sending women and progressive candidates in this election. And as we approach 2021, when the next redistricting process will occur. I think Philadelphia suburbs is going to be an area of that people are going to eye as they're drawing these maps.
Good point. And guess what's going to happen? We're going to have a Republican legislature, probably. I mean, we have another election to go through. And what, a Democratic governor? How's that going to work? To get a map, right?
Right, yeah. Well, this will be the first time in 30 years where Democrats have a seat at the table in drawing a congressional map.
Yeah. All right, on a lighter note, I got to get into this. The new lieutenant governor is a guy named John Fetterman. Family came from York. He's the mayor of Braddock. And he doesn't exactly dress like you would expect the presiding officer of the Senate. So I'm going to have fun with you on this.
Yeah.
Is he going to wear a coat and tie? I never see him in a coat and tie.
I believe it's required. Is that correct?
It is.
While you're on the Senate floor, to wear a suit and tie.
He has said that he's not going to rock the boat. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah. For people who haven't seen him, he's 6'8". He's bald. He has a goatee. He's got tattoos on his arms. He's the mayor of Braddock, sort of a down on its luck steel town outside of Pittsburgh. Yeah. He's become sort of a minor media darling a national media darling for the work he's done there. And he likes to wear cargo shorts and a work shirt.
He's the embodiment of sort of that working class.
Yeah, and he's his own personality. I mean, you don't have to agree with his positions. He's a Bernie Sanders fan, and he's on the liberal side. I'm not getting into that, but just as a personality, he's sort of taken hold in this state. When he travels around, it's all I hear is Fetterman stories, and you've been covering him.
Sure, and you know, when he's a big contrast to Governor Wolf, who is much more muted in his speech and in his demeanor, and I think it is fair to say that he sometimes, Fetterman, sometimes steals the show when the two of them are together.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, John Fetterman has the gift of gab. He's also, though, you know, he puts himself out there. He may not, you know, necessarily love, you know, the give and take of politics, but he's shown that he's able to get out there, put himself out there. He ran in the U.S. Senate primary in 2016, so he's got bigger goals out there.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in, and of course we have a lot coming up. The legislature will return, and we'll see where all that goes, and your participation in the program is really helpful. All right, it's American Education Week, and I don't think we can talk about a more important subject than education for the kids. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, as I said before the break, next week is American Education Week. I don't think we can find a more important subject to talk about. Joining me is Rich Askey. He taught for a couple of decades in the Harrisburg School District, and he's the vice president with the Pennsylvania State Education Association. You know, before we get into this subject, I mean, I must tell you, for years, education popped up in the surveys as the most important issue in the state. I do think the citizens in Pennsylvania, the residents, the voters, whichever category you want to look at, I think they fully appreciate the significance of education and what it means to the future for their kids. Now, you spent a lot of time teaching. Take it away.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of the reasons that Governor Wolf has the popularity this time around that he did, because he invested in our public schools, and everybody across the state is seeing that it is paying off, and our public schools are doing so well right now.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear, because the future rests with the young folks. As you know, we all move beyond, and they'll come and replace us. And well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about American Education Week. What's the business of celebrating that?
Well, I look at it as the start of the holiday season, because it is a celebration. It gives us an opportunity to focus on all the great things that are happening in public schools, and talk about the great people that are working in our public schools, the teachers, social workers, secretaries, bus drivers, and how they work with the community to lift our kids up and make the next generation great Pennsylvanians.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, we often hear, you know, this problem, that problem in the public schools, and I don't think that we focus nearly enough, as you're accurately pointing out, on the dedication of the school personnel, the countless hours that they spend. You know, look, let's be honest, every profession has somebody in it that shouldn't be there. I don't care wherever we're talking about, but there's not enough emphasis on the public schools and the work that they do. Now, you visit a lot of them, is that correct?
Oh yeah, that's one of the great things about this job, is I get to travel across the state. I get to go into schools and see the awesome things that our people are doing in their classrooms. And we're now focusing on telling those stories, because they need to hear those stories. We asked our members, tell us what you're doing in your classroom, and they have sent us some of the best and most great things that they're doing, and we're starting to get that out to the community. I
love some of the stuff that you're talking about. One is, and it's something that I don't think about, or that not me, but I think a lot of people, adaptive music. What's that?
Yeah, well, I'm a music teacher, so it's close to my heart.
There you go.
There's this young teacher in Middletown School District. He teaches at the high school. And he has a special needs classroom where the children have some very serious needs in those classrooms. And he's taking music, working along in a collaboration with their home-based teacher, and finding ways through music, which could be, he's teaching them colors. These are kids that need a little help with colors, by matching the color to the instrument, to the pitch, to the note. And so, so they hit the green tone, and they hit the red tone, and they're learning their colors. He gets them up and he has them move to the beat, which helps them with some of the skills that the movement skills that they need. And I watched the tape the other day, and it was one of the most fun things that I've ever seen.
Now and you also, well, let's run to a break. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, comics in the classroom. I mean, we'll talk about that. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Well, Education Week is coming up. I'm chatting with Rich Askey. He's a vice president of PSEA and a former school teacher in the Harrisburg School District. All right, if I remember this correctly, if you got caught with a comic book, they took the book away, and maybe they gave it back at the end of the day in school, but not. But you're saying. Yes, comic books are in.
Yeah, that's it. They are. Well, there's this another teacher, Tim Smythe. He's at the Wissahickon School District, and he's a social studies teacher. And he was finding out that he had some students that were reluctant readers, that they just were not into reading the textbooks. So he found like comic books. I call them comic novels. When you look at them, they're much thicker.
To let that sink in.
Yeah,
we got them here on video while you're talking.
And he's been able to pull his students in to learn about history and social studies by reading that, and they're making connections. He tells a great story where he put up a panel. His classroom is covered with panels from comic books. He put up a panel of a black Spider-Man, and this student was so enchanted with that picture that he all of a sudden became more involved in the classroom, and he's turning out to be improving all along.
So there's different ways to motivate students, to motivate kids. I mean, I think that goes at any level, but you're right, and this seems to make sense. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, I mean, what we have to continue to do is to attract good people to the profession. And that means we have to be careful what we say and how we deal with teachers in so many different ways. I mean, it's a tough job. And I've been a college professor my whole career. I always said I had it easy compared to what, elementary, middle school, and high school teachers had to go through, given the complexities of the problems that they face. So go ahead. Teaching.
Yeah, teachers go into the field because they have a passion for education. They have a passion. We're the land of opportunity, and the teachers want to give those kids the opportunities that start in public schools. And we just have to, I think all the teachers want is respect. They just want to know that they're appreciated. They want to know that their accomplishments with the kids are recognized. And we have to be lifting up the profession. We have to make sure that these folks are being paid what they deserve to be paid, that they're getting the supports in the school that they need to reach the children, that the climate in our schools are good and supportive for them. Those are the kind of things they're looking for.
Now, if we talk about trends with numbers of students who graduate from high school, go to college and go to one of the colleges where they do a good bit of teacher training. They graduate, they have to get licensed, and there's a trend. It looks like it's falling off. Is that correct?
Well, in 2010, the state gave out 15,000 certificates. Last year, they gave out 5,000.
Now, is that because the population losses in certain districts and there's just fewer demand for teachers, or?
No, we're entering a serious teacher shortage in Pennsylvania. We're having problems. I know my home district of Harrisburg School District is having serious issues with getting people. There's just not the applicants anymore, because some of our young people are looking at other fields to go into because they know that they're going to be more financially successful.
Yeah.
With a 4-year degree, they're
so
going to
let me make sure I understand
elsewhere.
what you're saying. We could be on a bubble of increasing demand, the need for teachers, but fewer folks are coming out of high school and going to college and getting into education programs. Is that basically what that
is number one. That is correct. And then we have the other problem that they get into the field and they only last for a few years because they find out, okay, if I go and work for this company, I'm going to make more money. Or they don't have the supports. We have to give them, the new teachers, it's when you walk in the door and it's just you and the kids, it's a whole different ball game.
Well, as we leave here, November 14th is Education Support Professionals Day, and that's when, hopefully people will get involved and first of all say thank you for what they do. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay well.